Hi, I'm Brian Malow, and we are live from the final day of the 7th Lindau Meeting on Economic Sciences. We're on a different island. We're not actually on the island of Lindau today, because traditionally the final day of the meeting is held on this beautiful flower island of Mainau. And it's mostly a social day, the final day. There's one final science session that involved let's walk a little. That involved one final panel discussion with a couple laureates and a young economist. And then we're just free to walk around and try to connect to the internet, apparently. So this year there have been 250 young economists on site and another 80 experiencing the meeting virtually. Along with 14 laureates here and 5 virtual. And I'm speaking to one of the young economists who I really wanted to speak to because he has recently relocated to basically where I live. I live in Raleigh, North Carolina, and Michael Pollmann is now at Duke University. What's your position?
I'm an assistant professor at Duke University. Actually, after coming from the Bay Area, where Brian also came from, apparently. So he really made good life choices, I believe.
You're following me.
Exactly.
Aren't you curious where I'm going to move next?
Yeah, I mean, you said Austin, you used to live.
Yeah.
Might be a nice place to move to at some point, right?
Yeah. So, Michael, you've had a great meeting, haven't you? I mean, you got to participate in every possible way. You were on a panel discussion, and you were one of the 60 young economists that got to present your research to your colleagues. And was it 2 or 3 Nobel Laureates?
Yeah, it's wonderful. I mean, I think generally, not just for the presenters themselves, but the sessions where we presented our work and then got to talk with the Nobel Laureates about it. But then also afterwards, the discussions continued, talking to some of the other young economists about our work, what we are interested in, how their interests overlap, and talking about any remaining questions that they had. So those 6-minute presentations plus 3-minute questions really were just great conversation starters as well.
Yeah.
So I think that just was a wonderful opportunity.
So what kind of economist are you? Are you an economist?
I am an economist. I did my PhD in an economics department. I am now working in an economics department as an assistant professor. What I do in my work is I'm an econometrician. That means that I don't really have any good ideas of what one should want to learn, but I try to help other people answer the questions that they want to know about. So it's somewhat similar maybe to your work as a science communicator, in that there's the scientist who speaks a certain language that may be difficult to understand for the general public because they use strange words, or even when they use regular words, they may mean something different with it. And quite in the same way, when the scientist wants to know something from the data, so from the measurements about what the real world looks like, they may have a great idea, but the data doesn't really know about that. So where I come in is I translate between scientists and data to help the scientists learn from the data what they want to learn.
So when you say you do that, how do you do that? What is it you actually do?
Yeah.
Are you developing statistical tools?
Exactly. So it's statistical tools. So similar to how maybe some scientists develop a telescope that allow other scientists to look at the stars, I develop statistical tools, so formulas that other people can look through to learn about some economic concepts.
And that's that word. So you said, I've been hearing the word econometrics.
Exactly.
And you called yourself an econometrician.
Exactly. So just making
what is
it
econometrics?
Making it even more complicated than just economics. We're going deeper into our Greek dictionary here. So the metrics part is really the measurement part. So where nowadays it's less me actually going out into the world to measure particular phenomena, it is still me going out into the world of data and trying to figure out how should I be measuring this particular data to come up with the answer to the question that the scientist is interested in.
Yeah. So does that mean, are you not particularly associated with any type of economics because your tools could be used by anyone?
So in the ideal case, obviously anyone could use it, but I think for me as an econometrician, personally at least, it's important to work on methods that are useful to answer questions that I am passionate about. So what makes me interested in econometrics is really helping researchers answer questions that also I find interesting. What that means for me is lots of questions from public economics and labor economics, how can we make life better by setting the right policies, both kind of government policies as well as labor market firm level policies.
Okay. So did you always know that you wanted to be an economist? An
econometrician. So
I even wanted to say economist because you still
economist is
identify
fine.
as an economist, right?
I am an economist.
I was even stumbling on the basic word.
Yeah.
But we're very sleep deprived because it's been an all-consuming week, hasn't it?
Which economists will actually tell you is a good sign. If you're interested in something and just say, oh yeah, I like it, those could be empty words. But us being sleep deprived actually means we had such a good time that we weren't willing to take the time to sleep. So economists should appreciate that as a very, very honest signal that
Does
we're
it
having a good
depend
time.
what ratio of our time we spent in bars?
I think for the fun, maybe partly, but I think for the
Yeah.
sleep deprived, any time matters.
But you know what? Something
Anyway.
that I've noticed about going to, I'm not a scientist, but going to science conferences and economic sciences, is that the conversations in the bar were probably mostly related to economics and adjacent topics.
Yeah, that's
so
the fun
much of
thing.
it.
Yeah. It's, we come to Lindau here. We are, I think you said 250 young scientists who are here, plus 80 or so more joining virtually. And it's, in a way, a very diverse crowd. I've spoken to people from practically all continents. I don't think there was anyone from Antarctica.
This year,
We
and
have
it's a
one.
little smaller. No, but
Oh, okay.
60 nationalities are represented
60
here.
nationalities. I've personally spoken to people from North and South America, Asia, Australia, Africa, and Europe. Just not Antarctica, I think. So quite diverse in terms of backgrounds, what you get, and also career stages. We have PhD students here, we have postdocs, and so forth.
Right.
But nevertheless, we all kind of speak the same language. We all have somewhat similar training that helps us kind of understand the basic concepts, the basic ways of thinking about issues. And that just makes for very engaging conversations with the other people here.
Is there something that you wish the public better understood about economics?
When I talk to my friends, at least initially, kind of when I started out kind of studying economics in college and econometrics in particular in college, people didn't really know what I was doing. So my friends were asking me questions like, what stock should they buy, or what's the economy gonna do next year? And those are very good questions. I would love to know the answer to them. But economics is a very, very broad area. So while some economists study those kinds of issues, others really do not. And sadly, I cannot tell you how to make a lot of money on the stock market.
All right,
next
then
year.
I'll have to think of a next question. Let's talk a little bit about the meeting. Some people that watch might be future potential attendees. How did you find out about Lindau?
I found out about Lindau because the organizers actually do, I think, a good job reaching out to faculty across the world and encouraging faculty to tell their students about it and nominate students. So my situation, it was my PhD advisor who actually approached me and asked, hey, I got this letter asking me if I know any students that might enjoy this. And I said, well, I think this sounds interesting. I mean, Lindau sounds like a beautiful place to be. Let me think about it a little bit. I thought about it a little bit and thought, actually, this is the perfect opportunity because I was about to try to find jobs and thought, oh, this is the perfect place to practice talking about my work, which sadly the meetings had been postponed by 2 years.
Right, so this was a couple years ago,
Yeah, so this was
pre-COVID.
pre-COVID, 2019 or so, when kind of the first round of people were joining. So I came here or applied initially with the hopes of talking to lots of people about my work, which ultimately I did get the chance with the Young Economist session you mentioned and also on the panel to talk a bit about my work. But I think this way was almost better for me personally because it made me much more relaxed and much more happy to hear about everyone else's work and kind of try to figure out how to help them with their work.
Excellent. And did you have any anticipations, and in particular, were there any laureates that you knew were going to be here that you were particularly interested in meeting?
The laureates that are in some sense closest to my work are actually the ones that won the prize just last fall. So they couldn't even have been here 2 years ago, but this year were able to be here. So in that way, I was particularly excited to meet Joshua Angrist from MIT, who won last fall. So, and that actually did work out beautifully. We had the science walk. So yesterday afternoon, I and 9 other young economists took a nice little walk across the wonderful Lindau Island with Josh Angrist, sat down in a cafe and had some cake and just talked about research, kind of how he approaches research and about our own research to get some feedback from him.
What was Josh's prize for?
Josh's prize was ultimately for methods that allow us to make causal statements. So one thing causes another thing in settings where we weren't actually able to do nice experiments. So I think nowadays, after the pandemic, we are all have become fairly familiar with these experiments where some people randomly got the real vaccine, some people got placebos, and that's how we know that vaccines are actually an effective method to prevent COVID. But
I was just making sure our bags are still there. Sorry.
No, I think I do see them, so I think we're in the clear.
But boy, compared to the United States, I really feel trusting everywhere when I'm in Germany.
It is a very safe island we are on here, I think. Anyway, so that's kind of experiments, and kind of experiments make it very easy to make these causal claims that it's really the vaccines that helped us fight off disease. But in some settings, we can't easily experiment because it might be something very big, very expensive, or very risky, or there might be ethical problems. So for a long time, it was quite challenging to know kind of vaccine efficacy for young children, for instance, because it's like very challenging to do it in a safe way to run these experiments. So there are some settings where experiments are difficult, and then you look at real-world data where humans just behaved in whatever way humans wanted, not because we economists told them to behave a certain way, but that they did whatever they wanted. And we try to figure out from that kind of data still why things happened.
Well, I'm so glad that he's the one you mentioned, because just yesterday, now we've been here since Tuesday, so Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, it occurred to me that back in the Triangle, I know someone whose last name is Angrist. Mm-hmm. And his name is Misha Angrist.
Oh, really?
And he is a professor at Duke.
Where I happen to be now as well.
He's a science writer, and I teach science communication. He's a friend in science communication circles in North Carolina. I have spoken to his class. So yesterday, I noticed that Joshua Angrist bears a very strong resemblance to Misha. And I walked up to him and I said, might sound like a strange question, but do you have any relatives in North Carolina? It's his brother.
Wow.
So talk about small world. And then it just so happens, so he's a colleague of yours over
he is a colleague
he's in, I don't know what department that would be, but it's science communication.
Yeah, so I haven't met him yet in my 1 month at Duke, but I do look forward to meeting lots of more.
So, so great. So, once you've been here now and the meeting's almost over even, besides the fact that you got to present, be one of the 60 next-gen presenters, and that you served on a panel, tell me a couple other little highlights you may have had this week.
Yeah, so there are some small things that just make you thankful for, in some sense, this event as a whole. I remember, I think it was Tuesday evening for dinner, kind of sitting down at a table, a chair approximately where I was about to sit down was kind of blocked off by a backpack. The woman sitting on the chair next to it apologized to me for blocking out that chair, because as it turned out, there was someone else whom she had met just a moment earlier, who told her she might help her out on a problem of how to understand some data she was having, that she was facing in her data, and she wanted to block off that seat such that over dinner they could talk about how to fix a problem she was facing in her research. So I was very happy to just scooch one seat over and let that happen. So there are those moments like that that are very fun. But then there are also, of course, the laureate talks. And I think for me personally, I think my favorite one was Oliver Hart. I think it was on Thursday morning, speaking about kind of socially responsible investing and those topics. And for me, it was a topic I've always found vaguely interesting, but haven't ever really learned much about and haven't ever seen any particularly detailed analysis about. And he made a very convincing case, I think, that what we really should be doing might not be divesting, but rather being more activist investors in pushing for the change we would want to see companies to make, because they can actually be a much more effective way of enacting the changes we are interested in.
The meeting in economics usually happens every 3 years. It's been 5 years because of COVID since the last one. But in 3 years, in 2025, there will be the next, hopefully the next economics meeting. To someone who might be considering applying, anything you would say to them?
You probably do want to do it. Even if you kind of don't know exactly what you're going to be up to and kind of what stage of your life you might be in and kind of what exactly your interests are, or whether you're going to find people like you, I think the answer to all of that is yes, you will find people who are like you. You'll find people in similar life stages. You will find people career stages. You will find people who are more advanced. So in some sense, whatever you need, you will find it here, because they just bring together a bunch of economists. And I think no matter what you want, you will find it here.
Excellent. Well, thank you for taking the time to talk to me. And we have a little while still to just enjoy the island. The science meeting is over and it's just a little more socializing.
And finally, the sun came out.
It did. It was threatening to rain, but it didn't.
Yes.
So thank you very much. And
thank you.
We'll be back with more interviews